Hi, welcome back to day 22 of the Sealy Challenge. Back in the early 90s at the University of Arizona, a poetry-loving friend enthusiastically convinced me, more like dragged me by the ear, to attend a poetry reading. The feature of the evening was none other than Mark Wunderlich. My initial thoughts were possibly more aligned to the grunge attire I was wearing, or whether I was going to get my own pair of Doc Martens, but I recall as Mark began, I was utterly captivated. And then after the reading, I recall sort of awkwardly approaching Mark, sort of serving up some clumsy compliments and some stupid self-deprecating jokes, while I am absolutely sure he doesn't remember this nervous college kid that evening kick-started my unwavering appreciation of his work. And over the years, obviously, every one of his books has found its way onto my shelf. And you're about to find out one good reason why. So here's to serendipity and the unexpected joys of college nights trying to impress a girl, and of course to the ever-evolving journey that I've had with Mr. Wunderlich's works. Cheers. Before we jump right in, I just kind of wanted to show these off real quick. So Mark's first book was The Anchorage, and I really love and adore this hard copy first edition that I got back in, 96 or something like that. No, 99. Yeah, that's when it came out. And this thing has seen many a read through, and it's just wonderful. Voluntary Servitude was his second book that came out, and I was fortunate to get a signed copy of this book, which is just wonderful, isn't it? And his most recent book, which we're going to read from today, is God of Wonders. What the fuck? God of Nothingness. What am I thinking? Sorry. God of Wonders. Yeah. Wonders and nothingness are kind of the same. Well, now that I've thoroughly embarrassed myself, God of Nothingness by Mark Wunderlich. Today I'm going to take a stab at reading The Son I'll Never Have. The son I'll never have is crossing the lawn. He is lying on an imaginary bed, the coverlet pulled up over his knees. Knees I don't dare describe. I recoil from imagining him as meat and bone, as a mind and hands stroking the fur of his pet rabbit. I never gave him the accordion I used to play. My mother and I, in duets, the Minnesota polka, What a Friend We Have in Jesus, never watched him push noodles into his mouth with fingers, while I wished he would use the spoon shiny with disuse. I am free from longing to be free. I do as I please. My money is my own. All the mistakes I make are only my mistakes. What is it to look at something you made and see the future? What is it to have someone made by your body, but whose mind remains just out of reach? I'll never know. Come here, little rabbit. Eat these greens. I will pet your cloudy fur with the mind's hand. Thank you, Mark. So let's talk about that a little bit. So Mark Wunderlich's The Son I'll Never Have. It's really a reflection of the might have beens, the sort of touching on those universal moments where we ponder life's choices and the paths that we did or didn't take, And the poem, I think, does a really graceful dance between the joys and freedoms of autonomy, yet that longing for connection and for ultimately legacy. And I think for just anybody picking this up and reading it, it's a nice sort of stroll through the garden of life's what ifs. But the twist, I'm approaching this poem from definitely a very different perspective, being a dad. And I want to talk to you a little bit about my insight as a parent and father to a son, and how this poem moves me so much more. So as a dad now for 12 years to my son, this does hit very differently. It has a hint of be careful what you wish for kind of vibe going on. I mean, first off, the imagery is wild. Imagining the kid crossing the lawn and chilling out on this imaginary bed feels a little bit like every time I've told my son that he was like almost invisible when playing hide and seek behind a curtain, and his toes were kind of peeking out, sort of like the imaginary kid. They're sort of there, but not. This line about the kid being meat and bone is pretty heavy. It makes me think of the time that I held my kid and I thought, holy shit, I'm responsible for this tiny human. It's raw, it's real. And while I've got my hands full making sure my son doesn't eat Legos, Mark Wunderlich is talking about accordions and the Minnesota polka. On a side note, I see Minnesota polka in a poem. That alone deserves a kind of poetic high five. But anyways, I digress. The real zinger for me is that bit about the freedom of not having a kid. I mean, man, I remember those days, sleeping in, spending money on stuff that wasn't related to school supplies or urgent toy needs. But then Mark really hits you with real talk, what it's like to see your future in something you've created. And I can tell you, every time my son does something wild, unexpected, or just plain heartwarming, I get it. The ending with the rabbit is like that moment when you're trying to have a heart-to-heart with your son, and they're more interested in their iPad, their iPhone, their pet hamster, their goldfish. You're reaching out, but sometimes all you get in return is the mind's hand. Okay, I know I've gone on and on and on. To sum it up, this poem's a roller coaster. It's a truckload of humor and feels. And there is a dash of I've been there. It's a perfect read for dads who have been knee deep in parenting and sometimes ponder the road not taken, but yet who wouldn't trade their current journey for anything. Thanks for your time today. As always, stay strong. Be persistent. Always curious, open heart, open mind. Until next time.